overview real quick. We're going to get into the works of Diodorus of Sicily. Yeah, the famous Diodorus they always quote, right? The Greek historian. As it says here, he is known for writing the monumental universal history of Bibliotheca Historica in 40 books. And I dodged the hijack with the whitewashing. Whether this is a real person or not, people quote him a lot in history. This might be another of these mixed Israelite or Hebrews with these other nations that appear to have become a lot of the early so-called Greeks. Just a possibility. Either way, I want to go to his writings. So supposedly his books were written between 60 to 30 BC. 3 parts, right? There's 12 volumes of it. We're going right into volume 12. All right? And we're going to be reading from book 40, the last book and the last chapter. All right, so we belly flop to this part of the book on book 40 where Diodorus basically gives his overview of the history of the Hebrews, right? And the reason he does that is because he's going to show the relationship between the ancient Greeks and these so-called Jews or Hebrews. It says here, now that we are about to record the war against the Jews, we consider it appropriate to give first a summary account of the establishment of the nation from its origins and of the practices observed among them. When in ancient times a pestilence arose in Egypt, the common people ascribed their troubles to the workings of a divine agency. For indeed, with many strangers of all sorts dwelling in their midst and practicing different rites of religion and sacrifice, their own traditional observances in honor of the gods had fallen into disuse. Hence, the natives of the land surmised that unless they removed the foreigners, their troubles would never be resolved. All right? So Diodorus is talking about literally the plagues of Egypt that we read about in the Bible. You know, what we read about Moses doing with the help of the Most High, with the staff and everything, so that Pharaoh can let his people go. Now, the way Diodorus is writing about it, he's saying there was a pestilence and that they were causing trouble to the native population, the Egyptians, right? Descendants of Mizraim and Cush. He don't mention that they were actually enslaving these other people that they wanted to get rid of. We know the other side of the story. So they wanted to get rid of the so-called Jews or Hebrews, right? These foreigners in Egypt. At once, therefore, the aliens were driven from the country, and at the most outstanding and active among them banded together, and as some say, were cast ashore in Greece and certain other regions. So listen to what Diodorus is letting you know, that during the Exodus, right? Literally, this is what he's talking about. They weren't driven out from the country. They left. They rebelled and freed themselves from bondage out of Egypt. They left with the help of the Most High. And Diodorus is letting you know that during this exodus, right, of the Israelites, Hebrews, they banded together, and some say were cast ashore in Greece and certain other regions. Their leaders were notable men, chief among them being Danaus. Okay, Danaus. Danaus in Greek mythology was the king of Libya. His myth is a foundation legend of Argos, whose the Argives is Danites too, as one of the foremost Mycenaean cities of the Peloponnesus and Homer's Iliad. Danaans, tribe of Dan, or Danaus, the Argives. Again, Danaus and the Danaans are the Danites. They did come out of the Exodus. And also Cadmus, yes, the historical, mythical Cadmus, right? In Greek mythology, Cadmus was the legendary Phoenician founder of Boeotian Thebes, the founder of Thebes, okay? Cadmus, an exiled Israelite. I'm not the one saying that. Diodorus is telling us Danaus and Cadmus, they're supposed to be mythical people, half gods. And like I've been showing you, these Greeks turned a lot of these antediluvian people, characters, into gods and created a mythological story about their origins. But again, Phoenician Cadmus, who's the Phoenicians? Remember in my Nations of the World Danite video, 2 videos prior to this one, Danites were being reclassified and grouped under Phoenicians. They were being tagged Phoenicians. So who are the Phoenicians? You always got to really study that. Get specific when they're saying Phoenician. Either way, Phoenicia, the land of Phoenicia, was in Canaan, the promised land. That was in America. You already know these people wore feather crowns. We got that on the last video. So Diodorus is letting you know again, they became leaders and notable men. These people coming out of the Exodus from Egypt, these Israelites, like Danaus and Cadmus. One thing about Cadmus I do want to point out, we're going to do future videos on this, is that his sister, as it says here, Phoenix, Cilix, and Europa. They named Europa after her, Europa. So if this is the sister of Cadmus, Cadmus is coming from the Israelites, then who is Europa? And why does it sound so much like Yoruba? Yoruba, Europa, Yoruba. Jorobom, Europa, Yoruba. But the greater number were driven into what is now called Judea, which is not far distant from Egypt and was at that time utterly uninhabited. The colony was headed by a man called Moses, outstanding both for his wisdom and for his courage. So who are we talking about? Judea, Moses, people coming out of Egypt, same people that Danaus and Cadmus came out of. This is Diodorus letting you know, supposedly in the 1st century BC, according to their hijacked chronologies, right? But they're letting you know still who these people are. Again, confirming what we've been already going over in the last 2 videos, who are the Danaans, okay? On taking possession of the land he founded, remember that it wasn't Moses exactly who reached Jerusalem, but Joshua, his successor. Besides other cities, one that is now the most renowned of all, called Jerusalem. Now listen to Diodorus telling people about Jerusalem like they've never heard about it. This is a very old primary source, letting you know who Danaos and Cadmus people are, the same people who founded Jerusalem, who followed their leader Moses, who came out of Egypt to marry the real Egypt, America, to marry. So I just wanted to start out the video today just with this real quick. You got to get past the mythology. You got to get past the fantasies and the conjectures and the generalizations. There's real history to most mythology. Hope you guys understand that by now. Another overview of something we went over in the last video regarding the Danites in ancient Bharat, or what they call today India. Make sure to watch that video if you haven't. Just going to read something here that correlates with that, something we left out of the video from yesterday. It says here, Cambridge University Press, Notes on the Early History of Northern India, Part 6, on the historical value, origin, and growth of early methods of record anterior to alphabets, including ideographic science, sacred numbers, and myths, by J.F. Hewitt. This is from the Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and Ireland from October 1890, pages 697 to 758. I'm going to belly flop to this part of the book. And in this part, they're talking about different nations that were going into ancient Bharat or India. And in this particular paragraph, they're talking about the Mongoloid tribes. It says, taking the last of these races first, they would seem to be the Mongoloid tribes of Malayan affinities who came to India from the east and instituted the first rude forms of village communities and of unions of villages into provinces. They were an agriculture and forest race and worshipped the Mother Earth and the local spirits living in the trees of the forest. They advanced slowly westward until they met with the second race. Listen to this. The Southern Australoids, right? The Southern Australoids, or Turanian Dravidians, Dravidians, the sons of the Akkadian Dan, the judge. Hold up. Southern Australoids and Turanian Dravidians are the sons of the Akkadian Dan, meaning a place, like saying the Dan of California, the Dan from New York, or the Bostonian Dan, the Akkadian Dan, the judge. The judge, remember the Danites are the judges, called Danava. We know the Danavas is Danites, and Asura, the Asura or the Surava people are from the sons of Dan, Shuham, Sus. In the Hindu mythology, Danus in the Sendavesta, and Danaoi by the Greeks, right? Confirming, same people. They were the shepherds living in the Himalayan valleys, the shepherds in the Himalayan valleys and the mountains of the east, who fed their flock and herds along the river plains, where they were open and free from forests. All right, again, Danites, the southern Australoids, the Dravidians of India are the sons of the Akkadian Dan, the judge, Danites. All right, Din to judge, Din to judge, Dan to judge. Let's read from this book real quick. It's from Mike M. Joseph, Middle East Blueprint for the Final Solution, the Come, Fall, and Rise of Western Democracy. I'm on page 512 of the book. And this part is referring to the letter between the Spartans and the Hebrews, and how they were both acknowledging that they were brethren. These Danite Spartan Greeks migrated later toward their new homeland in Denmark, Danmark, or Mark of Dan, okay, the Danes, and then to Ireland. Much later, some of their Danite musicians and songwriters composed songs like the famous The London Air, also called Danny Boy. You guys understand that famous Irish song, Danny Boy? They're talking about the tribe of Dan, the progenitor, Danny Boy, the tribe, the people. Let us now read some interesting quotes from the celebrated Irish author, Thomas More, in the History of Ireland, 1837. More tells us of, they took that page out, man. But don't worry, guys, I got the primary source. So again, the History of Ireland by Thomas More, Esquire, Volume 1. This is 1835. I got an earlier version. On page 71 of this book, of course, throughout the book, he's talking about the different nations of ancient Ireland. In this page 71, he is mentioning the Furbolgs. Now, the Furbolgs, future video, possible Hamite people, Hamite giant people. Tall, very tall people, considered giants, Hamites. Their tenure of royalty, however, was but short. For not more than 30 or 40 years had this quintuple sovereignty remained in their hands when they were disposed by the Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of the Danan, or the people of God, the tribe of Dan, a people famed for necromancy, who after sojourning for some time in Greece, where they had learned, right? They were where in Greece? Remember the Danan, the Danaoi, remember who was in Greece? Cadmus, who are the Spartans, who's all these people, the Argives. It's matching, right? The history, where they had learned this mysterious art. They had learned all this stuff. He's saying necromancy, wow, magic and all that. Proceeded from thence to Denmark. They went to Denmark, right? We just read they became the Danes and Norway. Denmark and Norway, the tribe of Dan from Greece, and became possessors while in those countries of certain marvelous treasures, among which were the stone of destiny, the sorcerer's spear, and the magic cauldron. Listen to that. Armed with these wonderful gifts, the tribe of the Danaans next found their way to Scotland, and after resting for some years, set sail under the auspices of their chieftain Nuad of the Silver Hand for Ireland. Here, landing secretly under the cover of a mist which their enchantments had raised, these sorcerers penetrated into the country and had reached Sleap and Uaruin, the mountain of iron, between the lakes of Allen and Irni, before their presence was discovered. In process of time, the Tuatha De Danann were themselves dispossessed of their sway, a successful invasion from the coast of Spain having put an end to the Dananian dynasty. All right, what happened? And transferred the scepter into the hands of the Milesian or Scotic race. All right, future video, who's the Milesians or Scotic races, all right, which through so long a series of succeeding ages supplied Ireland with her kings. All right, so that was a little history here. A little further ahead in the book, it says here, by some, the Danaans are conjectured to have been Danes, or at least from the country of the people afterwards known by that name. And the Bardic historians who describe this colony as speaking the German language mention Denmark and Norway as the last places from whence they migrated to the British Isles. Interesting footnote here says the superior intelligence of this people, the Damni or Danaans, and of the Clanarroquois, considered with Tacitus' account of the trade of Ireland, induced me to suppose that the coal works at Ballycasty on the northern coast, which exhibit marks of ancient operations, had been worked by either or both. All right, the Danaans were doing that mining. They were great metal workers, the tribe of Dan. And so who was mining the copper out of Michigan, right, and bringing it, right? Who was the merchants, remember? All right, again, that was just some references from the book The History of Ireland by Thomas More. We're going to go back to the other book we were reading. All right, so you guys remember, we got caught off. They were about to quote Thomas More. And yeah, well, good thing we had the original, right? So we went to see it ourselves. We're going to continue. It says the Tuatha De Danann came to Ireland and subdued the alarmed Belgians or Fir Bolgs, after which they became the sole rulers of Ireland. The first contingent of the tribe of Dan arrived around 1456 BC. This was during 40 years' wanderings of Israel in Sinai. The Danaans had a good reason to leave the main body of Israel and travel to Ireland via Greece. A large group of their tribe had formerly migrated out of Egypt shortly after the death of Joseph, some 200 years earlier. The Bible adds a bit of information concerning the Danaan migration while the main body of Israel was still in the wilderness, and the reason for such forced migrations of possibly also other Israelites, all right, fleeing from their brothers. In the book of the prophet Ezekiel, chapters 20, 21 and 23, we read, notwithstanding the children of Israel rebelled against me, they did not walk in my statutes. Also I raised my hand in oath to those in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the Gentiles and disperse them throughout the countries. Though God did not choose to record such dispersion in the book of Moses, biblical evidence and history gives us some clues about this happening. A second contingent of this Danite tribe leaped out of Bashan during the period of the prophetess Deborah in 1213 BC, all right? Different waves of Danites, all right? This is what they're talking about. Soon we shall find out who these Tuatha De Danann, or the tribe of Dan, were. The well-known 19th century ethnologist Dr. Robert Gordon Latama was certain that the Greek Danaans were the descendants of Dan. We got that already locked down, okay? And his Ethnology of Europe, we read that in the first installment of this Danite research, 2 videos prior to this one. Brief overview again. He says, neither do I think that the eponymous ancestral name of the Argive, Danai, or Argos in southern Greece was other than that of the Israelite tribe of Dan, all right? That's written in Ethnology of Europe, very important book. Only we are so used to confine ourselves to the soil of Palestine in our consideration of the history of the Israelites, confirming that the people of Dan must have had close connections with their brethren in southern Greece. He concludes, yet with Danai and the tribe of Dan, this is the case, and no one connects them. The Irish histories are replete with references to the people of the tribe of Dan as coming from Greece. The historian Mueller, in his comments on some of the fragments of the Greek manuscript of Hecataeus of Abdera, says, Hecataeus therefore tells us that the Egyptians, formerly being troubled by calamities, 10 plagues of Exodus, you hear that? Oh, they're calamities, the plagues, in order that the divine wrath might be averted, expelled all the aliens, Israelites. Remember they were saying they made them go away? No, they left on their own because they wanted freedom. They gathered together in Egypt. Of these, some under the leaders Danaus and Cadmus, again migrated into Greece. These are Israelites. Others into other regions. And there's more Israelites in other regions. Listen, we're going to get to that in future videos. The greater part into Syria, Canaan, right, the promised land. Their leader is said to have been Moses, a man renowned for wisdom. All right, so that's the same story we got. Is cut off anyways. They cut us off again, but we got that already. Theodorus telling us the exact same thing. All right, so we continue in the book Dan, the Pioneer of Israel. Where is this tribe today? By Colonel J.C. Galler, Keeper of the Crown Jewels. It's from 1880. And we go to chapter 5 of this book. Yeah, we've literally gone over the previous chapters. This is the final chapter. It says here, Danaans, or Danes of Scandinavia, Ireland, and Scotland. The Danes are always spoken of as the Gothic family, Scandinavia and others, though seemingly more specially given to the sea than the other Gothic tribes. The reputed common ancestor, leader, or deity of Goths, Saxons, and Danes was one Odin. The Danes also claim as an ancestor or leader a renowned warrior named Denyen, and hence their country was called Danemark, or Dan's land. Okay? Dan. All right, real quick. Wikipedia, right, says Dan the First of Denmark. Just so you guys can see, I'm not making this up. This is literally in their stories. It says Dan the First was the progenitor of the Danish royal house, according to Saxo Grammaticus Gesta Danurum. He supposedly held the lordship of Denmark along with his brother Angle, the father of the Angles. So the Danites' brother. So this obviously is a Danite too, most likely. Angle, right? Angles, who's Angles? Angle is the father of the Angles, who is the Anglo-Saxons. All right, future video. They made us think that all these people were, white and mixed with all these Germanic and Gentile. You guys got to understand time periods and who the people originally were and where the names come from has nothing to do with the people who later on moved into those regions in more later times. It says here in the Danish history, book 1, now Dan and Angle, with whom the stock of the Danes begins, were begotten of Humble, their father, and were the governors and not only the founders of the race. Yet Dudo, the historian of Normandy, considers that the Danes are sprung and named from the Danai. From Dan, however, so says antiquity, the pedigrees of our kings have flowed in glorious series like channels from some parent spring. Again, that's from the Danish history, book 1. Elton's translations. All right, coming back to the book, Dan, the Pioneer of Israel, says here the settlements of the Danaans, or Danes in Denmark and Norway, seem to have been made in very remote times, for the Irish colony of Danaans are said to have visited Denmark first, and to have found their compatriots and namesakes there before them in some strength with considerable towns. All right, you guys hear that? It is characteristic of these early Danaans that wherever we read of them, we hear of their establishing schools and being regarded, of course, for their superior knowledge as magicians by the simpler aborigines of the countries to which they came. Odin is a historical and mythical personage. It was a name also often assumed by Danish chieftains. In Norse, it is Otin. In Gothic, Wotan, or like Botan, right? Like the king in Palenque, Botan, Wotan, future video. The Lombards wrote Wodan. Old Saxons, Wodan. Westphalian Saxons, Godan or Gudan. Odin's capital, Asgard, was supposed to be between the Euxine and the Caspian Seas. The chronicle of the Swedish kings commences with an account of a people on the east of the river Tanaquils. The Tanaquils is the Dana Strom or Danube. The people were governed by a pontiff king, Odin. These people introduced the worship of Odin into Denmark and Sweden. In Norway and Denmark, as in Scotland and Ireland, Baal worship flourished. The old mark of Phoenician company, all right? So-called Phoenicians, remember? That pet of Jezebel, wife of King Ahab and daughter of Ethbaal, king of Sidon. Here also we find almost national, the old badge, which everywhere we have observed attaching to the Danaoi, or Danites, the serpent. Numerous Danish families bear it, and it is the most common device in the ancient Danish jewelry. All right, so real quick before we continue with that book, just wanted to go ahead and show you that this is really part of Danish history. This is a very old book right here. It's Godefredis Givilium Accessiones Historica. Old historic book written in Latin. And this part right here, as you guys can see, Dani, Dan, Judaico Dan. Judaico Dan, we cannot read this completely. So what I did is I took it over to Google Translate. This is the part I grabbed over here. You guys can go back and verify it's the same. And then this is what it's telling us. And so they talk about the Ute. We're going to talk about the Ute and the Utes and Jutland and future videos. They're getting that straight from Judah or Judites. Now, I'm not telling you that all these people are all 100% Judah. Remember, there was other nations up there that they were associating with or mixing with. Now, it says here, they call out Jeff is a Jewish name, and the land is called Jutsia. And the inhabitants of it are Juten. All right, they're talking about Jutland up there in Denmark, and they're saying that the inhabitants are Juten, Judahites, and the name of the kingdom of Denmark in the inhabitants of Denmark is the Jewish name of Dan. This is an old Latin book, okay, very old Latin book. It's telling us the kingdom of Denmark and the inhabitants of Denmark comes from the Jewish name of Dan. In the times of Dan, who was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, his father prophesied, saying, Dan will judge the people. Let him be a serpent in the way, biting the horse's hooves, so that he may fall behind him. All right? This is an old Latin book telling you who the Danes are. And also the Juten. Jutsia, they're Jewish. Aramaic, Hebrew, Old Paleo, whatever you want to call it, one of the old languages. Back in the book, Dan, the Pioneer of Israel, says here, Ireland. The old Irish manuscripts, many of which I believe are still untranslated, seem to possess a vast amount of information regarding the Danaans, or Tuatha De Danann, tribe of Danan. At present, Keaton's History of Ireland and Annals of Ireland by the Four Masters are, I believe, the best works. And these histories compiled from ancient records, the Danaans and Milesians, said to be the same race, are represented as arriving in various batches from Greece, from Gothland, in the Euxine, and from Scythia near the Euxine and Caspian Seas. All right, we got that in the last videos. They were up there in the Black Sea area too, the Danites. And early Phoenician and Egyptian affinities are likewise noticed. Thus, they confirm much of the information regarding the various colonies founded by the Danai, which have been traced out through many historians in this paper. All right, so right here, he's actually quoting the two books. We're gonna do a couple paragraphs, but we're gonna go to the actual primary sources. I have them. It has a lot more information, so let's go and read those. All right, so this is one of the books right here. It's The General History of Ireland, again, by Keaton, Geoffrey Keaton. This is from 1861. All right, just real quick, this is in the beginning of the book. They are letting you know that the Tuatha De Dananns held the sovereignty of Ireland for 197 years. So I just wanted to mention that. A little further up in the book, gives us an origin for the name of a town or a province, the divisions of Connacht. The province of Connacht from Limerick to Drop House contained 900 towns of villages. And they're saying regarding the name, it received its name, as some suppose, from a trial of necromancy between Sith Nelak and Khan, two druids of the Tuatha De Dananns. Who's the druids? The Tuatha De Dananns, the Danites, the Magi, remember. Who's the druids? The prize fell to Khan, who by his magical skills covered the whole country of Connacht with snow. Cognitha signifying the snow of Khan, from whence it obtained the name of Connacht. All right, he made snowfall. All right, a little further up in the book, it says here, the king of the Tuatha De Dananns, when they invaded Ireland, was Nuadha Airgiotlam, that is, silver-handed. This prince engaged El-Qaid in a most desperate battle, was fought at Muc Tuiriod between the two kings, in which El-Qaid the son of Eric, the son of Eric, was routed in 10,000s, or according to others, and 100,000s of the Furbolgs were slain. In this action, Nuadha Airgyudhanam lost his hand, and the wound was 7 years under cure, and he was forced to have a silver hand fixed to his arm. The invasion of Ireland by the Tuatha De Dananns. The Tuatha De Dananns were the posterity of those who followed the third son of Nemedius out of Ireland. When the Africans had usurped the kingdom and enslaved the inhabitants, this people, rather than bear the heavy oppressions of those pirates, left the island under the command of Jarbahal Faid, a son of Nemedius, and arrived, if we believe some antiquaries, in Boeotia. Others say that they came to Athens and settled near the city of Thebes. All right, so Thebes was again founded by Cadmus, so that is correct. That was also a Danite. Yet the truest account is that they landed in Achaia, a country of Greece. I remember the Achaeans are Danaans, that borders upon Boeotia, and near it stands the city of Thebes, according to the account of Pomponius Mela. Here it was that the Tuatha De Danann learned the art of necromancy and enchantment, and they became so expert in magical knowledge that they had a power of working wonderful feats, so far as seemingly to raise the dead. For when the country of Achaia and the city of Athens was invaded by the Assyrians, and several battles fought between them, these sorcerers would use their diabolical charms and revive the bodies of the dead Athenians, and the next day bring them into the field, which so dispirited the Assyrians that they began to despair of victory, and thought to give over the enterprise and to return into their own country. For to what purpose was it to fight and come off conquerors one day, when they were to encounter the same enemies the next? And then it speaks about the Danes and the 4 cities they founded in Denmark and Norway. Says the names of these cities were Phalias, Gorias, Phoenias, and Murias. More. Now look at this, Phoenias, right? If you're a person who dwells in Phoenias, you're a Phoenician, right? Phoenician, Phoenias. In each city, the Tuatha De Dananns appointed tutors as presidents of these schools. They were persons of the greatest skill among them. When the Tuatha De Danann had continued for some time in this country, they thought fit to move and look out for a new settlement, and they arrived in the north of Scotland, where they continued 7 years, near Dubhar and Yardobar. From the 4 cities which they possessed in Denmark and Norway, they brought away 4 curiosities, or monuments of great antiquity. The first was a stone, which was called Lea Fail, and was brought from the city of Phalias. And I believe that's Jacob's rock, or Jacob's stone, from which stone the city received its name. This stone was possessed of a very wonderful virtue, for it would make a strange noise and be surprisingly disturbed whenever a monarch of Ireland was crowned upon it. All right, yeah, that is Jacob's stone, which in motion it continued to show till the birth of Christ, who contracted the power of the devil, and in great measure put an end to his delusions. It was called the fatal stone, and gave a name to Innis Fail, as the poet observes in these verses. All right, interesting story there, huh? This stone called Lea Fail had likewise the name of the fatal stone, or the stone of destiny, because a very ancient prophecy belonged to it, which foretold that in whatever country this stone should be preserved, a prince of the Scythian race, that is, of the family of Milesius, king of Spain, should undoubtedly govern. All right, I would say of the line of David, or Jacob. It says here, the second valuable monument of antiquity that the Tuatha De Dananns brought away from the Danes and carried with them into Ireland was the sword which Luitheid Langfada, that is, the long-handed used in battle, which they conveyed from the city of Gorias. The third curiosity was a spear, which the same prince used to fight with. It was lodged in the city Phoenias, but removed by these necromancers into Ireland. The fourth was cauldron called Corian Dagda, that was carried out from the city Morias. The Tuatha De Dananns continued 7 years in the north of Scotland, and then they removed to Ireland. They arrived there upon the first Monday in the month of May, and immediately set fire to their shipping, as the poet observes in this manner. They land upon the shore, and then they burn their ships, resolving never to return. All right, you hear that? This part of the book, page 99, the author's confirming that the Tuatha De Dananns came out of Achaia or Aegean Sea, Greece, the Argives, these are Danaans that had settled there, remember, from Canaan, from the Promised Land, from Egypt. They say they settled near Boeotia and the city of Thebes. Remember, Thebes was founded by Cadmus, a Danite, coming out of the Exodus, coming out of Egypt. So now we're going to go to the second book that the other book, Dan, the pioneer of Israel, was quoting. Again, I wanted to go to the original sources for you so you guys can see it, so we can read a little bit more specific info and not just like a couple lines. And this is the book, The Annals of Ireland, translated from the original Irish of the Four Masters by Owen Connellan Esquire. This is from 1846. When the colony called Tuatha De Danann first invaded Ireland, they landed in Ulster and proceeded thence to Sliab and Iarrain, the Iron Mountain, and Breffni, and forward into the territory of Connacht. The Furballs, having collected their forces to oppose their progress, a desperate battle was fought between them at a place called Mac Tuareat, or the Plain of the Tower. All right, so it's going over again what happened. So we already know the Danites took over the Hamites, the Furballs. A little further ahead, it says here that O'Mulbrennan or O'Mulrennans are given by O'Duggan as chiefs of Clan Connor in Roscommon. Manannan here mentioned was Manannan MacLear, or son of the sea, a celebrated Danan merchant, a Danite merchant, and one of the first navigators in the west of Europe, from whom the Isle of Man took its name. An account of Manannan may be found in O'Flaherty's Ogygia. Okay, a Danan merchant. And then it goes over the Stone of Destiny again in this book, or what they were calling the Lia Fail, or Stone of Destiny, right? Sitting on which the ancient kings, both of the Danan and Milesian race, were for many years crowned at Tara. This stone was sent to Scotland in the 6th century for the coronation of Fergus, King of Scots, who was descended from the Milesian kings of Ireland, and was used for many centuries at the coronation of the Scottish kings and kept at the Abbey of Scone. All right, again, this is Jacob's stone, from whence it was taken to England by King Edward I when he invaded Scotland and placed under the coronation chair in Westminster Abbey. Okay, again, this is Jacob's stone. Just want to read that just so you guys can understand. This is very important to them. There is a reason, again, that is Jacob's pillow or stone. Now, in one part of the book, it talks about the language possibly being Phoenician, the Irish, and you know how Cadmus, he brought the alphabet, the Phoenician alphabet, to the rest of these Gentile people. That was a Danite, not a Phoenician. I'm just gonna belly flop right here. It says it may be further observed that the word Ogam or Ogam in the Irish language signifies occult or sacred, and is considered by Toland in his History of the Druids and by other antiquaries to have originated from Gaul, as the ancient Gauls worshipped Hercules as the god of learning and eloquence under the name of Ogmios. All right, Hercules is that Samson the Danite. So they worshipped Hercules, the god of learning and eloquence, under the name of Ogmios, or according to the book of Balimote, the name was derived from Ogma, one of the Tuatha De Danann chiefs. Ogma, all right, Ogam writing, who had introduced that occult mode of writing into Ireland. You guys hear that? So the Ogam, and this reminds me of the videos we did recently, right? When they found Ogam writing in America, in ancient America, Ogam writing. And you guys can see it, that was created by a Danite. It makes sense because Cadmus, the supposed Phoenician, was a Danite. Here regarding the Furball, it says when they were conquered by the Danaans, they were reduced to a state of slavery under them for a period of about 200 years. That's Hamites being enslaved by Danites for 200 years. But on the arrival of the Milesians from Spain, the Furbolgians, having assisted them in the conquest of the Danaans, were partly restored to their ancient possessions by the Milesians. All right, so the Milesians, future video, who they are the ones who drove out or took the power from the Tuatha De Danann. It says here the derivation of their name, according to some, was from Danan, one of their queens in Ireland, and the word Tuat, which means a tribe, hence Tuatha De Danann, signified the tribe or people of Danan, or sons of Dan. They turned him into a female. Yeah, as their chiefs were descended from her three sons, Brian, Uakar, and Ukarba. or according to others, they were designated the Danan from D, which signified gods, hence called De Danann or gods of Danan. From their great power and magic skill, others derive their name from Tuat, a lord, hence Tuatha De Danann, which would signify lords of Danan. The name has been Latinized Danane and Danani and anglicized Danaans. At the time the Danaans were in Greece, okay, they remember they were coming from Greece, they are said to have assisted the Athenians in their wars with the Assyrians or Syrians who had invaded Greece. But the Assyrians, having proved victorious, the Danaans, for fear of falling into their power, left Greece under the command of their chief leader called Nuad and emigrated to Lochland or Scandinavia, now parts of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And having remained there many years, they next proceeded to Alban, or that part of North Britain, now called Scotland, where they remained 7 years, and sailing from thence they arrived at Inus Elga, or the Noble Isles, then the name of Ireland, and landed in the northern part, now Ulster. From thence they proceeded to Slab on Ireland, or the Iron Mountain, and Brifni near the lake now called Low Allen and Leitrim, the Forbole colony, who were then the possessors of Ireland. Having collected their forces, advanced to oppose the Danaans, and a great battle was fought between them at Mac Tuadet, or the plain of the Tower, a place situated near Low Mask and Mayo, in which the Furballs' forces were totally vanquished, and 10,000 of them, together with Okoi, their king, were slain, and the cairn or sepulchral monument of great stones raised over King Eoki still remains on the strand near Bali Sadar in Sligo. This was called the Battle of South Moy Ture, and in 30 years afterwards, another great battle was fought in North Moy Ture near Low Arrow in Sligo, in which the Furballs' forces, combined with the Fomorians, were again overthrown by the Danaans, who thus became masters of Ireland. All right, so another historian confirming who they are, where they coming from, the same as the Danan from Greece. So that means these are the tribe of Dan. We've already broken that down, that the Danaans are the tribe of Dan. Continuing a little bit further here, it says the Danan kings and queens and chiefs were buried in the great cemeteries of Krukan and Konau, and of Tailtin and Bru of the Boyne and Meth. All right, these cemeteries have what? Danite kings in them and queens. The Danaans were represented as great architects. Who's the architects that helped build the Temple of Solomon? Who did Hiram really send to build the temple? They were half Danites. Some of them might have been 100% Danites. They were great architects, mound builders, and said to have built many fortresses in Ireland, among others, Carter Crofin, or the stone fortress of Crofin, situated at Tara, and so called from Crofin, one of their queens. All right, grand architects. The origin of the Danaans is involved in much obscurity and has puzzled various antiquarians. Our Irish annalists make them a branch of Nemedians, who were a colony of Scythians from the country near Exum Sea of Thrace, and afterwards settled in Greece, as before stated. Others consider they were some of the Pelasgi, a people of Thrace and Macedon, who were the earliest inhabitants of Greece and Danaus. All right, so we already kind of know the origin of these Danaons and Danaans and Danites, so they're going over the different theories. We've kind of broke it down in the last 3 videos. You guys, dodge any hijack. So use the knowledge we've gained already to decipher all this right here. So one of their kings at Argos is mentioned about 15 centuries before the Christian era. And from him, the Greeks were called Danai. The Greeks were called what? Danai. A name resembling the Danan of the Irish writers. Others consider the Danaans probably from the similarity of the name as a tribe of the Dodonai or Dodonians, who were also Pelasgians, and the founders of the famous Oricon Temple of Jupiter at Dodonia in Greece, and also of the Oricon Temple of Apollo at Delphi. The learned Villanueva and his Ibernia Phoenicia supposes that Danaans might be Phoenicians and have gotten the name Danani from the city of Dan in Palestine. All right, he supposes, all right, he's guessing, but yes. So all these people are a little right, they're just a little off, but they all have the right idea. They are so-called Phoenicians, or people from the promised land, Canaan, sea people, right? Phoenician sea people coming out of Phoenicia, the city, traders, Danites. Yeah, coming out of the city of Dan, because they are the Danites who named the city Dan. Others consider from the similarity of the names that the Danans were Danes. All right, again, same people. And our analysts also state that the Danans were sometime in Scandinavia. Now, down here, they're talking about the worship of fire or of Bot, as the word bot or bot, according to Cormac's glossary and O'Reilly's dictionary, signifies fire. The word bud means life, wisdom, or the world. And the word bud or bud is also often written bud, like Budweiser, bud. Hence, both the words appear to have similar signification, and it appears probable that Fergus of the fire or a bot was so called from being a fire worshipper. Hence, bud, or bud seems to have been one of the pagan deities of the Irish, Bud. And Valency considers that the worship of Bud prevailed in Ireland, being introduced by Danaans, who were Dedanites from Chaldea. Danites from Chaldea, that's Ireland. Chaldea is Ireland right there, because there was probably Danites already before the Tuatha De Danann, living in Chaldea or ancient Ireland. Amongst the traditions of the people, the Danaans are said to have been converted into fairies and to live still in the rafts of either earthen ramparts called forts, we're talking about mounds, in a state of enchantment. And the Danaans are often mentioned as fairies by many of the bards, okay? We're going to get into all that. Again, the Danaans were represented as highly skilled in the arts, and after they had been conquered by Milesians, they became the chief artificers and mechanics of the country. As architects, workers in metal, right? The smiths, right? And even in the traditions of the people to the present day, they are considered to have been great builders, all right? Who's the mound builders? And to Goban Saur, a name signifying Goban and the builder, a man of the Danan race, a famous architect, is attributed the erection of the round towers. All right, the famous round towers that we also find in ancient America and many other great buildings in Ireland. In the early ages, Valency was of opinion that Buddhism prevailed in Ireland, having been introduced by the Tuatha De Danann, whom he considered to have been the Danites, right? Danites, from the land of Dan, from the land of Dan in Chaldea, Ireland. Hence, the term Tuatha De Danann would signify the people of Dedan, as the word Tuat in Irish means a tribe or people. The term Bodak, signifying a clown or churl, is considered to have originated from Bud or Bot, as Bodak might mean a Buddhist, and was probably applied as a term of contempt to the worshippers of Bud after the introduction of Christianity. A little further ahead in the book, we have here the palace of Ayalek. They just letting us know that this was, again, built by the Danaans. It says this fortress was called Griandan Ayalik, from Grianan, which signifies a palace or royal residence, and Ayalik or Oyalek, a stone fortress derived from ale or oil, a rock. It was likewise named Ayalek Need, or the stone fortress of Need, according to O'Flaherty, Ogygia, from its having been first erected by Need, one of the Tuatha De Danann princes, and it was used as a residence in very remote ages by the Danan kings. All right, that fortress, if you guys know what I'm talking about, was a Danite stronghold, and they built it. Again, they are architects. All right. So we go back to the book, Dan, the pioneer of Israel. Where is this tribe today? Colonel J.C. Dollar, Keeper of the Crown Jewels, 1880. That's the book we just read, Annals of Ireland by the Four Masters. We already got that. Down here it says Villeneuve's Phoenician Ireland, translated by H. O'Brien. Page 184 has the following curious remark accounting for the name Danan. When endeavoring to prove them Phoenician, I recollect that in the Phoenician language is to be found the word Danihain, signifying illustrious, generous, noble, or rather Danifor, Danani, or Danita. The inhabitants of the city of Dan at the foot of Mount Labanos, the spot where the Phoenicians worshipped the graven image given them by Micah, and where Jeroboam erected his golden calf. It would be endless to attempt to relate all that is said in the Irish records of the Danaans, and that mark of Phoenicia and Israel, Baal, worship. The Psalter of Cashel says that the Tower of Tara was built for the preservation of the fire of Baal, and was called Bel Din. The early connection with Greece, Phoenicia, and Egypt is constantly alluded to throughout the chronicles and records of the Irish Danaans. I have not observed that the serpent appears among Irish symbols, but Dr. Clark observes that the freedom of Ireland from serpents was attributed to a talisman astrologically formed under the sign Scorpio. Here may be an occult connection between Ireland and Scorpio, Dan's sign. Now remember this, they just mentioned something there very important about the snakes being driven out of Ireland. What snakes? Remember the Danites' emblem is the serpent. Continuing, the eagle, however, does appear. An ancient coin of Ireland was called an eagle, and the figure of an eagle was impressed upon it. It was current in Edward's I's reign, about 1270 AD. The mythical bird, the phoenix, so characteristic of Tyre, is sometimes met with. It is supposed to expire in flames and rise young again every cycle of 490 years. Its original place is said to have been Heliopolis, or the city of On, in Egypt, one of the most remarkable cities connected with the history of the Israelites. Okay? All right, continuing with the book, Dan, the Pioneer of Israel. We're in chapter 5, page 43. It says here, Scotland. Large bodies of Danaans crossed over to Scotland, both from Europe and from Ireland, in very early times. Here also we find numerous traces of Baal worship and Bel Dain, as well as Buddhism. The pillar stones generally bear a serpent, all right? Now see how that connects with the book we just read about Buddhism and the towers? We see the Phoenician serpent deity with its head surrounded with a nimbus, or half, as the sun itself, curiously enough reproduced as one of the supporters to the arms of the Highland clan Donaci. Coins of Philip of Macedon, and also of the Bruti and Magna, Graecia or Greece, were found on the estate of Carenburg in Aberdeenshire in 1824. A gold coin of Alexander the Great at Ecclefechan, Dumfriesshire. A large number of Greek coins were found on the farm of Braco in the parish of Shoto, Lanarkshire, one of Athens, one of Boeotia, and Parthian coin of Arsaces, the 11th. The subjects of the Danaans in Ireland and Scotland cannot be dismissed without a brief notice of the coronation stone. According to the Annals of Ireland by the Four Masters, this stone was brought by the Danaans from the east. All right, he's going to mention the stone we're talking about, which we already know because we went and read the books ourselves. That's Jacob's stone, Jacob's pillow, the one they use all the kings in their coronation. They still have it there in England. It says, when our King Edward I went forth to see the mountains, and understanding that all was in peace and quiet, he turned to the abbey of Scone, which was of Chanon's regular, where he took the stone called the Regal of Scotland, upon which the kings of that nation were wont to sit at the time of their coronation, for a throne, and sent it to the Abbey of Westminster. The Scots dreamed that this was the stone whereon Jacob slept when he fled into Mesopotamia. This is Jacob's pillow, okay? They believed that? You think they were doing that all those years because it was some fake myth? They knew that stone was the pillow, Jacob's pillow. Yes, that is the exact stone. And that exact stone is in England, on the throne of England. England, right? The remnant of Judah and the Israel of Ephraim, the two families under one head, a Hebrew episode in British history. This is by Frederick Robert Augustus Glover. But you guys know I just said the stone is in England. Same stone, Jacob's pillow. And real quick it says here, postscript on Dan, we're on page 127. Whatever may be thought or predicated of the position of other of the 10 tribes, there can be no ambiguity as to the fortunes of one portion, at any rate, of the descendants of Dan. It has been stated that most cultivated of the incursive settlers who made seizure in Ireland some 800 or 900 years BC was an audacious race of able seamen, right, sea people, seafarers, who were very self-assertive for some 197 years, but who, by some unexplained phenomena, then suddenly seemed to have collapsed. There were the Tuatha De Dananns, to whom, says the Mainov professor of history, Reverend Matt Kelly, the Irish writers unanimously attribute the introduction of the Lia Fail, a colony which, wherever they came from, landed in north of Ireland. The stone arrived some 130 years later. If they were of the tribe of Dan, as their cognomen insists, and were a portion of that election of grace, of 7,000 which had not bowed the knee to Baal, this subsidence might be accounted for from their own glory being absorbed by affiliating with the greater glory of the great tribe in Albanians, Judah. All right, listen to this. Judah. Who was in Albanians? Judah was there. They're saying Danites deciding to do good and coming together with Judah. While these Danites would still carry on the race in conjunction with them, with whom these princes of Israel had made alliance in blood by the marriage of Eokai the Danite with Zedekiah's daughter, the Hebrew woman surnamed Tephi. Okay, that's a big one, major drop right there. That's a future video. If you guys didn't notice, they're letting you know here that the throne at this moment in history was being carried by the women, the daughters of Judah. Something had happened to all the princes of Judah. All right, I'm going to show you guys in a future video, but I want you to see here, they're letting you know real history, real genealogy. The surviving daughters of Judah, 3 of them, one of them, Tephi, married a Danite man to help Judah continue the blood and to come into alliance for the Most High, to carry the name of Israel further in these lands. So Zedekiah's daughter, all right, remember Zedekiah, one of the last kings of Judah. Nebuchadnezzar did something to him and his sons. So the surviving daughter, Tephi, was married to Eokai the Danite. We read about him in the books we were reading today. He was of the Tuatha De Danann. I want you guys to see the correlation, whose remains, all right, and regarding Queen Tephi, whose remains to this day, as every Celtic Irishman believes, lie in the Celtic tomb on Tara Hill. All right, Queen Tephi, Hebrew woman, the daughter of Zedekiah. She's the one that kept alive the line of Judah. And they used a Danite man to help with that, for the seed. I want you guys to really pay attention to that. Right now, Tephi is the matriarch. She was the matriarch of Judah. Only matriarchs were around when this was going on. Judah only had matriarchs left. Something had happened to their princess. Go read the scriptures, Jeremiah. So this is a major drop right here. Perfect for the dismount. Whole lot of water here. It may be too much right now for people to understand what I'm showing you guys. But again, we're just going to get deeper and deeper and more historic and get out of the mythology and fantasies and religious mind frames. Break out of those spells. Again, her Hebrew identity being proved by the Hebrew meaning of the word mergeth, a repository which in Celtic has no meaning whatever. These Tuatha De Dananns, who appeared in Ireland more than a century before the Hebrew prophet came from the east, a very able and somewhat accomplished people, look very like the civilized ship people of lively, trading, maritime coast. In one of those ships, the Hebrew stone arrived about 130 years later in Danish waters, the Belfast Low. In this case, the Danite prince Eokai of Ulster would be a zealous coadjutor in all the beneficent changes which the prophet of the Lord would desire to bring about. Little wonder then that Tara became, as if by magic, a transplanted Jerusalem.